It begins not with a confrontation, not with a dramatic argument, but with a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. The initial cruelty is not in the act of leaving itself, but in the long, silent prologue that precedes it, a prologue he is never meant to read. A man operates on a foundational belief that love is built and maintained through consistent investment. He pours in his time, his energy, his loyalty, and often, without even realizing it, he anchors his very identity to the relationship. He believes in the economy of effort, that what you put in, you get back. This is his first and most devastating miscalculation. The unraveling is so subtle that to name it aloud would feel like paranoia. It's in the slight delay in her response to a goodnight text, a delay that was never there before. It's in the way her laughter at his jokes becomes a half-beat too slow, a little less genuine, a little more polite. It's in the slow dimming of the light in her eyes when he walks into the room. She begins to withdraw her affection, her curiosity, her shared joy, long before her words confirm the distance. It's a silent, emotional disinvestment, and he feels it in his bones, a primal alarm he can't quite silence. He feels like he is slowly bleeding out from a wound he cannot see or locate. He checks himself, wondering what he has done wrong, replaying recent conversations, searching for a misstep. He often concludes he is being too sensitive, that he is inventing problems, and so he doubles down on his efforts planning a nice date, buying a small gift, trying to bridge a gap that, from his side, feels like a temporary rift, but from hers, is a chasm she has already decided not to cross. This is the great deception of the end. While he is still fully anchored to her, building a future in his mind, imagining next year's vacation, saving for a home, picturing their lives intertwined for decades, she has already begun to untie the ropes. While he is saving for us, she is saving herself, emotionally preparing for a journey she intends to take alone. She continues to go through the motions, offering the occasional "I love you" that lacks its former warmth, participating in conversations about future plans that have become, for her, mere fiction. This creates a surreal duality. His reality is one of commitment and continuity, while hers is one of quiet preparation and exit strategy. He believes everything is fundamentally fine, perhaps just needing a little work, because that is the picture she allows him to see. The cruelty is in this performance, in being led to believe in a security that has already been hollowed out from within. When the final confirmation comes, it is rarely a mutual recognition of a relationship's end. It is a verdict. It may be delivered through a sudden, sustained silence that is louder than any shout, through a blunt and clinical conversation, or through a look of such profound indifference that it freezes the soul. The impact is so brutal because of the violent contrast. The woman who once held his face in her hands and looked at him as if he held the secrets to the universe, now looks at him as if he is a stranger. An inconvenience, a piece of furniture to be cleared away. This shift cuts deeper than any insult because it is not merely rejection. It is a form of erasure. The person he was in her eyes, the loved one, the partner, the hero of her story is suddenly and irrevocably revoked, leaving behind a ghost she can no longer see. The foundation of his world, built on the assumption of her love and presence, crumbles in an instant, and he is left standing in the ruins, not just of the relationship, but of the reality he thought they shared, the moment the words are finally spoken. A chasm of misunderstanding opens up between them, not of meaning, but of experience. The verdict itself, "I think we should break up," or the more definitive, "I don't love you anymore," lands with the force of a sudden, catastrophic earthquake. For him, it is an event that shatters the present and blackens the future in a single, brutal stroke. The ground gives way beneath his feet, and he is plunged into a cold, turbulent ocean of shock, grief, and desperate confusion. His reality is instantly reconfigured around this new, agonizing absence. Every plan, every dream, every mundane habit that included her is now broken, and the pain is immediate and overwhelming. He is, in every sense, just beginning the process of mourning. What he cannot yet comprehend is that for her, this moment is not the beginning of the end. It is the end of the end. The earthquake he is experiencing is one she has already weathered, alone and in silence, months ago. The emotional work of leaving, the true and painful labor of detachment, was done not in this conversation, but in the quiet, private theater of her own mind, while she still shared a bed with him. She has already endured the sleepless nights of doubt, the internal battles between guilt and her own unhappiness, the slow and painful process of untangling her heart from his. By the time she speaks the words aloud, they are not a spontaneous confession, but a rehearsed line in a final act she has already written. She has already grieved for the relationship, for the man he was to her, and for the future they planned. She has already processed the loss, and in doing so, she has built a psychological dam between herself and the pain. When she delivers the verdict, she is not standing in the storm with him. She is watching from a shelter she constructed. While he was still believing the skies were clear, this fundamental asymmetry of timing is the engine of the perceived cruelty. Her calmness feels like coldness. Her resolved certainty feels like a lack of caring. Her ability to articulate the reasons without breaking down feels clinical and heartless. He looks at her, searching for the mirror of his own anguish, and finds only a placid, impenetrable surface. This is because she is not in the same emotional place as he is. She is months ahead on the path of healing. While he is just being hit by the truck of abandonment, she has already been through surgery, physical therapy, and is now in the stage of mild rehabilitation. He is drowning in the deep end, gasping for air, while she has already swum to the shore and dried off. This disconnect makes genuine communication impossible. His pleas, his promises to change, his raw vulnerability, all of which are born from his fresh, acute pain, bounce off the armor of her processed grief. They are irrelevant to a conversation she feels she has already concluded. Her objective is no longer to fix, but to be free. To achieve this, she often must actively suppress her empathy, hardening her heart against his suffering because to feel it with him now would be to risk being pulled back into the orbit of a dying star, a gravitational pull she has exhausted herself to escape. Her survival instinct demands this detachment. But from his perspective, it is the purest form of cruelty to be abandoned not just physically, but emotionally. In his moment of greatest need, if the present is shattered and the future is stolen, the final, most profound cruelty is the retroactive annihilation of the past. Just when a man believes the wound is complete, he discovers a deeper cut, the systematic rewriting of the history he held sacred. This is not merely a matter of moving on. It is an act of historical revisionism, a desperate and often subconscious effort by the one leaving to burn the bridges behind her so thoroughly that return becomes unimaginable. To justify the immense emotional rupture of leaving, she must construct a narrative where the departure was not just preferable but necessary. This requires transforming the shared story from a cherished epic into a cautionary tale, and in the process, she recasts him from beloved protagonist into the source of the problem. He is left reeling, not just from the loss, but from the wholesale invalidation of his lived experience. The love he believed was real, the memories he held as evidence of a profound connection, suddenly reframed as a mirage or worse, a period of his own delusion. She may claim she was never truly happy, that she felt trapped for years, or that his love was suffocating rather than nurturing. In her new telling, his devotion becomes neediness, stability becomes boredom, his occasional human failings become the central, defining traits of his character. The thousands small sacrifices he made, the nights he stayed up to comfort her, the dreams he shelved to support hers, all of it is minimized, forgotten, or twisted into evidence of a flawed and insufficient partnership. This is not necessarily done with malicious intent, but with a psychological imperative. It is easier to walk away from a prison than a garden. So, she must convince herself, and often her circle of friends, that it was always a prison. For the man, this is a uniquely devastating form of gaslighting. It forces him to question not just the breakup, but the entire foundation of the relationship and his own perception of reality. He finds himself sifting through old photos, replaying conversations, examining anniversaries and inside jokes, searching for the hidden truth she now claims was always there. Was her laughter on that beach vacation really forced? Was the heartfelt letter she wrote him merely an empty performance? The certainty of his own memories turns to quicksand. The narrative of their love story, a core part of his own identity, is violently edited without his consent. He is left with a corrupted file, a beautiful movie that now ends with a title card stating, "It was all a lie." This erasure of shared meaning is more painful than the loneliness that follows. Loneliness is an absence. This is a violation. It doesn't just tell him he has lost her. It tells him that what he thought he had was never truly his to lose. The past, which should be a source of comfort and a storehouse of proof that he was loved and capable of loving, becomes a poisoned well. He is exiled not only from his present and future with her, but from the sanctuary of his own past, left to wander in the ruins of a history that has been declared false, in the raw and disorienting aftermath of the verdict. A new and surreal layer of pain emerges, defined not by what is said, but by a profound and chilling absence of feeling. This is the era of the void, where the vibrant, emotional woman he loved is replaced by a detached, functional shell. The cruelty here is one of stark contrast and psychological whiplash. The same person who once stayed up all night worrying when he was sick, whose face would light up when he entered a room, now regards him with a flat, impersonal gaze, as if he were a customer service representative who has inconvenienced her. This is the armor of detachment, and it is her primary tool for survival, but to him, it feels like a form of emotional murder. He, still reeling and drowning in the fresh torrent of his grief, instinctively reaches for the tools that have always defined their intimacy: vulnerability, conversation, and heartfelt appeal. He pours his soul out in long, pleading texts. He tries to logic his way through the emotional wreckage, presenting a case for their love as if it were a business proposal that could be salvaged with the right amendments. He makes promises. He apologizes for flaws he may not even possess. He begs for just one more chance to fix things. He offers up his broken heart, expecting that the sheer raw truth of his pain will stir something in her a memory of their bond.
Oh.
A flicker of the compassion that was once so central to her character. But his words hit a wall of pure indifference. They do not anger her. They do not sadden her. They simply fail to register. She does not flinch. Her eyes, which once softened with love or flashed with irritation, any sign of life now, remain as still and unreadable as stone. This is the most disorienting cruelty, the absence of any fire to fight against. He often mistakes this numbness for hatred. But hatred would be a welcome heat. Hatred, at least, is a passion. It acknowledges his existence and the significance of what they had. It means she still cares enough to burn. The void, however, is far colder and more absolute. It is a state of being emotionally offline. She has not become his enemy. She has become a stranger who possesses intimate knowledge of him. This is a necessary survival strategy for her. To allow herself to feel the full weight of his pain, to engage with his vulnerability, would be to risk the entire painful process of detachment she has already completed. It would pull her back into the gravitational field of the relationship, a force she has expended immense willpower to escape. So, she shuts down. The compassion he knew from her evaporates, not because it never existed, but because she has deliberately and systematically disabled it for her own self-preservation. The texts go unanswered. The phone calls are sent to voicemail, not out of spite, but out of a desperate need to maintain the sterile field around her healing heart. For him, however, this silence and this void are a special kind of torture. It is the ultimate invalidation. His deepest emotions, his most sincere pleas, are met with a silence that screams one thing: you no longer matter enough to warrant a feeling, not even a negative one. He is not being fought. He is being deleted. The initial searing pain of the breakup eventually dulls into a persistent ache, but the true legacy of the cruelty is its transformative power. A brutal education that forges a new and different man from the ashes of the old. This chapter is not about getting her back. It is about the slow, painful reassembly of a self that feels shattered beyond recognition. He is left in the wreckage, tormented by a silence that offers no closure. His mind, wired for logic and solutions, spins in an endless loop of unanswered questions. When did she stop loving him? What was the exact moment he failed? What specific word or action sealed his fate? He replays years of history, searching for clues, inventing scenarios, and blaming himself for crimes he did not know he committed. This absence of a definitive answer is a unique torture, a wound that cannot scab over because it is constantly picked at from the inside. It forces him into an endless spiral of what if with no resolution, a purgatory of his own thoughts. Compounding this is the public spectacle of her apparent recovery. In the weeks and months that follow, she often appears to land softly, seemingly unscathed. Social media showcases a new vibrancy, pictures with new friends, laughter that seems too loud, a life reborn. She may even be in the arms of another, a sight that feels like a final brutal stab to a man still bleeding out. This contrast is salt in the wound. He gave everything, and she appears to be thriving without him. What he cannot see is that this is often a performance, carefully curated mask to convince herself and the world that the choice was right. But in the moment, it feels like the ultimate betrayal stacked upon the initial abandonment. It reinforces the devastating narrative that he was the weight holding her down, and his absence is her liberation. This is the crucible. The cumulative weight of the cold departure, the rewritten history, the indifferent silence, and the spectacle of her moving on does not just break a man, it melts him down. The fundamental beliefs that guided his life, that devotion guarantees loyalty, that sacrifice earns appreciation, that love is a safe harbor are exposed as naive illusions. This is a brutal education, but it is an education nonetheless. He learns that his worth cannot be dependent on another's presence or approval. The experience carves out his softness, his blind trust, his naive hope. In its place, something harder begins to grow, a core of self-reliance forged in the fire of profound betrayal. He vows, sometimes bitterly, never to hand over his entire identity to a relationship again. He becomes more cautious, less quick to invest, and fiercely protective of his own peace. Paradoxically, the very cruelty that was meant to discard him becomes the source of his ultimate strength. Having survived the coldest version of love, he finds he fears less. The worst has already happened. He has faced the void of indifference and endured the annihilation of his reality. This knowledge, once integrated, grants a strange, unshakable power. He stops begging for warmth from those who withhold it and learns painstakingly to build his own fire. The man who emerges is sharper, wiser, and heavier, with the knowledge of how quickly love can turn to indifference. He may never love with the same reckless, open-handed abandon again, but he will love with a clearer eye and a more resilient heart. The scar remains a permanent record of the pain, but it also serves as a reminder. He endured, he rebuilt, and he is still standing.